A young husband and father goes out duck hunting and never returns. His truck and boat are found nearby, but there is no sign of him. Investigators believe he drowned or was eaten by alligators, but his mother, trusting her instincts, refuses to give up on finding the truth. Welcome to History, Mystery, and ESL, where we share true crime, mystery, and history stories in simple English, along with thought provoking questions. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Let's dive into the mystery of Mike Williams. Jerry Michael Williams was born in Bradfordville, Florida in 1969. His mother Cheryl ran a daycare from their home so she could stay close to her kids. His father was a Greyhound bus driver. They didn't have a lot of money, but they were a close family that shared so much love. Jerry Michael Williams was referred to as Mike. He was the kind of kid who would just make any parent proud. He was polite, focused, and kind. As he got older, those qualities only grew stronger. He went to North Florida Christian High School and excelled in school. He served as the student council president and captain of the football team. After high school, Mike went to Florida State University, where he excelled as well. After graduating, he was hired as a property appraiser by a real estate firm. He was extremely hardworking and became very successful at this job, making about 200,000 a year. Mike not only excelled at his job, but also his personal life. He married Denise Merrill in 1994, and they welcomed a baby girl, Ainsley Williams, in 1999. Mike and Denise met all the way back in second grade and started dating in high school. Denise was a cheerleader at the same high school. She was very beautiful. Mike and Denise both came from religious homes. They shared the same beliefs and values. They now had a beautiful daughter and lived in a beautiful house. They were really considered the perfect couple, and it seemed they had the perfect. Also, Mike and Denise were also very close friends with another couple from his school, Brian Winchester and Kathy. Brian and Kathy also went on to get married. Mike and Brian had been best friends since the second grade. Brian was an insurance agent, so after Mike's father passed away, he got some guidance from Brian to increase his life insurance policy just in case something ever happened to him. He wanted to make sure that Denise and your daughter would always be protected. Question: would you ever take out a life insurance policy? On the morning of December 16th, 2000, Mike went duck hunting at Lake Seminole. It was one of his favorite hobbies. It was also his wedding anniversary with Denise, so he planned to come home by noon to celebrate with his wife that evening. By noon, Mike was still not home and still didn't come home as time. Denise started to get worried and called her father. Her father advised her to call the police, so she did. A search began by the police. Mike's best friend Brian and Brian's father also joined in to search. Mike's truck and boat were quickly found near the lake, but there was no trace of Mike. The police searched for days, then weeks, but they found absolutely nothing. This was bizarre to investigate. At first, they thought maybe Mike had drowned, but if that were true, surely his body would have turned up. Then they came up with another theory that perhaps Mike drowned and was eaten by the alligators in the lake. This explanation didn't make much sense either, but the investigators appeared to settle on it as the most likely scenario. Oh my gosh. There was one person who refused to accept this theory, and that was Mike's mother, Cheryl. She had always been concerned about Mike's passion for duck hunting, especially because of the alligators in the area. But Mike had reassured her time and time again that during the winter months, alligators hibernate and don't feed, and it had been very cold on the day he went duck hunting. Even if the alligators had somehow ignored their natural behavior and attacked him, Cheryl knew that there would still be pieces of him found nothing. But when the searchers found nothing, she just couldn't believe the story everyone else seemed to. Mike. But the investigators were ready to move forward with their theory, and in early 2001, they closed their investigation into Mike Williams' disappearance. Everyone except Cheryl seemed ready to move on, including Mike's wife, Denise. She arranged a memorial service the day after the search officially ended and pushed to have Mike declared legally dead so she could claim the 1 million. 6 months after Mike's disappearance, a pair of waders were found floating in Lake Seminole. Divers were called to search the area and recovered a hunting jacket and a flashlight from the bottom of the lake. Inside the jacket pocket was Mike's hunting license. However, this was odd because there was no signs that the items had been in the water for long, and no evidence, such as teeth marks or DNA, connected them to Mike. Despite this, a week later, a judge granted Denise's petition to have Mike declared legally dead based on the record. 5 years later, Denise found love again with none other than Brian Winchester, her dead husband's best friend. They got married in 2005 and became a family, raising. Now, let's talk about the hero of this tragic story, Mike's mother, Cheryl Williams. Cheryl always believed that her son did not just drown or get eaten by alligators. She worked very hard to find out the truth about what really happened to Mike. Cheryl wrote down everything that didn't make sense. She started with gathering facts. She wrote 27 pages of notes, pointing out problems in animal aspect. She spoke to animal experts to dispel the alligator theory. She wrote over 1,200 letters to Florida's governor at the time, Rick Scott, asking him to reopen the case. Even though he didn't respond, Cheryl didn't stop. She went public with her story and stood by street corners, holding signs to draw attention to Mike's disappearance. She spoke to reporters and news outlets to keep Mike's story alive, and it worked. News outlets became interested again and started covering the case. As more people learned about Mike's disappearance, public attention grew. This pressure helped lead the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to reopen the case in 2004 and investigate what really happened. Question. Let's hear your superhero mom stories. What's something amazing your mom did that showed just how powerful? All of Cheryl's efforts to uncover the truth created tension between her and Denise Williams. Denise said she wanted to move on with her new life and didn't want to keep hearing about Mike. She even threatened to keep Cheryl away from her granddaughter, Ansley, if she didn't stop. But Cheryl refused to give up. She loved Ansley deeply, but Mike was her beloved son, and she was willing to do whatever it took to find out what happened to him and bring this. As it turned out, Denise's new life was far from perfect. Behind closed doors, her marriage to Brian was falling apart. He had become jealous and controlling, afraid that Denise might leave him. Everything came to a breaking point on August 5th, 2016, when Denise made a chilling at gunpoint. On the phone, she sounded shaken and terrified. She told police that Brian had just kidnapped her at gunpoint, but she managed to escape. She went straight to the police station to report what had happened, hoping Brian would be arrested. Now, both the police and much of the public strongly suspected that Denise and Brian had something to do with Mike's disappearance. After all, Mike vanished under strange circumstances shortly after buying a large life insurance policy from Brian. Then, Denise and Brian married and acted like Mike had simply drowned, never showing much interest in finding out what really happened. Their behavior had always looked suspicious. The two people that the two people they believed might be involved. So the police approached Denise, hoping she would finally tell the truth about Mike. But she didn't break. She insisted she still believed Mike drowned and showed little interest in talking about his case. She only wanted to focus on what Brian was arrested for kidnapping Denise and faced the possibility of life in prison for the crime. Since Denise refused to cooperate, the police turned to Brian, hoping he would give him a deal. If he ref- if he confessed to what really happened to Mike, they would grant him immunity. And Brian confessed. According to Brian, he and Denise started planning to kill Mike about 6 months before Mike disappeared. Brian and Denise were having an affair, and they wanted to be together without Mike in the way. Denise didn't want a divorce, so she thought the only way was to kill their spouses so they could start a new life together. They came up with multiple plans to end Mike's life, including a staged boating accident, a car accident, an accidental shooting while hunting, or even pushing him from a tall building to make it look like an accident. Ultimately, they decided on the plan to take Mike duck hunting early in the morning and push him into the lake, where Brian hoped he would drown. On the morning of December 16, 2000, Brian and Mike drove to Lake Seminole to go duck hunting. They used a small canoe to go out onto the lake. Brian told Mike to wear waders and a thick hunting jacket, clothes that make it hard to swim. When they reached deep water, but his plan didn't go as expected, Mike resurfaced and grabbed onto a tree stump. He started yelling for help, panicked and confused. Brian, now also panicking that Mike didn't drown, went over to him, pulled out a shotgun, and shot him in the face. Brian then loaded Mike's body into his car, drove to a remote area, and buried his body in a shallow grave near Car Lake. He cleaned his vehicle and planted Mike's truck and boat to make it look like a hunting accident, and then went back home like nothing happened. With this confession, Denise was arrested and charged with first degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and insurance fraud. She pled not guilty and continues to deny any involvement in Mike's death. But on December 14th, 2018, she was found guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison for murder, 30 years for conspiracy, and 5 years for insurance fraud. However, in November 2020, her murder conviction was overturned. Denise was resentenced to 30 years in prison for conspiracy to commit murder. What is the worst betrayal you have ever experienced? Brian Winchester received immunity for his confession but was sentenced to 20 years in prison for kidnapping Denise. This story is so heartbreaking, but there is some comfort in knowing that Denise and Brian ultimately brought about each other's downfall, with a lot of help from Cheryl, of course. As always, Cheryl stood strong in the courtroom and delivered a powerful emotional impact statement that reminded us all of her unwavering love and determination throughout this case.
When I went to the lake, God told me Mike was not in Lake Seminole. He didn't drown. He didn't get eaten by alligators. I had to find him and bring him home. Judge Hankinson, for the next 17 years, I made telephone calls, put up missing person signs, compiled my notes into a book, and had people post on social media for me. With the help of friends, we raised money and put up billboards. I bought ads in the Tallahassee Democrat and worked with the Twin City News, asking everyone to help me find Mike. I stood on street corners waving my picket signs with pictures of Mike on them. I was cussed out by ministers for being too close to their church. I wrote 2,600 letters to the governor of Florida asking for help in finding my son. I begged Fish and Game to do a criminal investigation. They told me Mike drowned and got eaten by alligators, and there was no need for an investigation. They laughed at me and called me crazy. 9 months after Mike disappeared, his wife, Denise, told me if I continued to seek a criminal investigation, I would lose Ansley, my granddaughter, Mike's only child. Denise might as well have waved a red flag in front of a bull. I knew that she knew where Mike was or what happened to him. Judge Hankinson, I am a fighter, not a victim. I love Ansley, but Mike was my son. I became even more determined to find the truth. If I had not done what I did for 17 years, Mike's disappearance would have never been solved. It took me 3.5 years to get FDLE to open an investigation into Mike's disappearance because the Winchester and Merrill families pushed the theory that alligators had eaten Mike. Fish and Game and FDLE should have known that alligators are ectothermic. They don't eat in cold water. Instead of investigating, they chose to ridicule and call me crazy and tell me that I didn't do things the right way. There is no manual to tell a mother what to do when her child goes missing. I just did what God put on my heart to do. Judge Hankinson, not only did Denise kill my son, she stole my granddaughter, Ansley, Mike's only child. For her entire life, Ansley was raised in a house with the murderers of her father while being denied the love of her father's family. She was told that Grandmama Cheryl was crazy and would hurt her. I have had no relationship with her since she was 5.5 years old. Judge Hankinson, there is no amount of prison time that will bring Mike back to me. I don't know if I will ever have Ansley in my life again because of the damage her mother has done. I am asking you to lock Denise Merrill Williams Winchester up for the rest of her life with no chance of parole. She has already lived 18 years longer than my son. She got to watch Mike's daughter grow up. Nick, Mike, and I didn't. Please don't allow Denise to ever be around any of her future grandchildren, because one generation of Williams children growing up around murderers is enough. Judge Hankinson, for the rest of my life, when I try to sleep at night, I will see my son clinging to a tree stump in Lake Seminole in the dark, knowing that his best friend is trying to kill him. I hear his voice screaming for help. I wasn't there to help him. It will haunt me forever. In conclusion, Judge Hankinson, we are in this courtroom today because of God, not Cheryl Williams. I am Mike's mother, and I did what God told me to do. My son's horrific death demands justice. With today's sentencing of Denise Merrill Williams Winchester, I believe justice will have been served. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mike's remains were found in October 2017, 17 years after he went missing. A funeral service was held for him, and he was finally laid to rest on September 8, 2018. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for more ESL true crime stories. See you next time.